Good morning. Welcome back to the car. It's Monday, and I don't want a Monday. But let's talk about ley lines. The last time I was in the car chit-chatting, I talked about how weird stuff is going on around my house and my property. And Crickets Bay left me a really nice comment. They said, it sounds like you live on a ley line. I hadn't really considered that until I read that comment. I've known about ley lines, but every time I hear about them, I associate them with Europe. Like, even though I know that this is supposedly a global phenomenon, it's just kind of etched in my head that ley lines are a purely British thing. So I had sort of brushed that idea away, but it got me thinking, it made me curious, and since then I've been on not quite a roller coaster, but I'd call it like a carnival ride of research and investigation. I'm actually not super happy about some of the things I've found, because out of all the weird stuff in the world, now that I have a little more information, it is harder for me to believe in ley lines as they are generally talked about than it is for me to believe in anything else. But I feel like it's important to be objective when we're doing research, so I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The term ley line was coined by a man named Alfred Watkins back in the 1920s. He was a historian, archaeologist, photographer, beekeeper, a whole bunch of cool stuff. And he went rambling about the British countryside and realized that certain landmarks lined up very precisely. He did a whole lot of surveying, and he wrote his own book about this. He called it the Old Straight Track. His theory said that the ancient peoples of Britain deliberately put their sacred sites, their forts, their moats, their standing stones, etc., in arrow straight lines across the countryside, because they understood that the shortest point between 2 points, the shortest path between 2 points, is a straight line. And they used these lines to navigate by. They were roadways. I haven't had a chance to get a copy of the Old Straight Track and read it myself, but after reading a whole lot of summaries and discussions from other people online, just the idea that like ancient peoples put all this effort into creating navigational aids for themselves is a really awesome idea. You know, it's really cool to think about, even though he made absolutely no relation to any kind of cosmic energy or electrical force or any of the other things that in modern times we attribute to ley lines. Now, I could only find this next part in one article online, so if anyone else has extra sources with amplifying information, I'd really appreciate them, because this hurts me, and I want to believe. I don't have like a little angel over here and a little devil over here. I have like a little Scully on one shoulder and a little Mulder on the other, and Mulder's been crying for weeks now. Anyway, apparently back in the 50s, there was a Frenchman who started plotting UFO sightings over Europe, started drawing them out on a map where they happened. And he found out that they made relatively straight lines. Someone else got a hold of this research, put it together with Ley Lines, and wrote their own book about it, and said the UFOs must be following the ley lines. They must be either using them to navigate or drawing some kind of power from them to levitate their spacecraft. Sometimes correlation does indicate causation. Sometimes it does. But that just struck me as a mighty thin thread to knit everything together with. Especially since we don't know that the straight lines the UFOs were flying in, according to the French guy, were anywhere close to established ley lines. Now enter the 60s, and all of the free-spirited hippie folk who are attuning to the earth and the cosmic mysteries anyway, I guess found this idea and helped it grow into what we commonly think of as ley line theory today, that there is some kind of mystical grid work of energy that surrounds the planet that travels or runs along ley lines. Now there are many explanations as to like what exactly that is and how it works. I've heard it's the lifeblood or the chi of the planet itself. I've heard it's some kind of electromagnetism. I've heard like the stone circles and certain structures like the pyramids that ancient people built are actually some kind of machines that generate the ley line energy. Like there's so many theories. They've all been really well talked about online, so I'm not gonna like waste your time here. But I don't know, it just doesn't click right with me, I guess, when I start really thinking about it and peeling back the onion. Which sucks, because I had always kind of like heard that and been like, oh yeah, that tracks. I'm with it. Well, maybe I'm not actually. One of the big questions I had at first was, where are the ley lines in North America? Because like I said, we hear about this all the time in Europe. They're pretty well documented, I guess, and we'll get into that later, in like Great Britain. But I've never ever heard them being discussed in North America. Now, if you Google North American ley lines, half of what you find is about some video game. And there are maps out there. People have taken the time to create maps. And apparently there are tons of lines zigzagging around everywhere, all over the continent. But none of them are really well explained. They're not really labeled. There's no telling what criteria was used to make the map. Like, what is actually plotted at each point. For example, I found one where like they had mapped out certain mountains, but those also connected in line with major US cities. And they didn't say why they had made that decision, whether they had like felt something or experienced something in those places or not. So I find it hard to trust something like that. I decided to make my own map. And here I ran into probably the biggest argument against ley lines. And that is just how easy it is to manipulate data. I wanted to build my map on criteria that made sense. I wanted to know if there was like the North American version of the old straight track to start with. So I said, what would our equivalent to ancient stone structures be, right? We don't have a Stonehenge. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have just megalithic, like standing stones dotting the countryside. But what we do have are massive earthworks left by the native people. And these are really, really cool on their own, even when they don't line up with things, because they're built out of earth, like they're built out of dirt, right? And they've lasted like 1,000 years. And some of them are in really cool shapes. It's raining now. The first thing I discovered was that there are many, many more Native American earthworks than I ever imagined there would be. So I narrowed my search to the eastern half of the US because that's where I am. And at the heart of this question is, do I live on a ley line? So right there, that's a problem. I have excluded half of the data in my country, right? I'm like ignoring the western half to save myself weeks and weeks of research and mapping. I've also had to cut out anything that is very small or not well known, because if you search state by state, there are small earthworks everywhere. There are sacred hills and burial mounds everywhere, but they're not well known. A lot of them are on private property. They haven't been excavated. They haven't been like researched or documented in any way. But they are there. They count. But what I had to do, because again, I had just hundreds of thousands of things I could have put on the map. To make it less labor intensive, I started looking for the biggest, the most well-known, and the most well-researched or well-documented mounds, and bonus points if they had some kind of astrological significance, similar to Stonehenge, how you can use it as a calendar, like the sun will rise on the solstice at a certain point and set under a star, that kind of thing. Or if they were in some kind of special shape, like a perfect circle or an animal or a human figure. I came up with like 8 or 10, and I plotted them in Google Maps. And what I saw was just a jumbled blob. Just a completely random scatter of points. I had to take points out of the middle. I had to remove, I think it's called the Cahokia Mounds, and a couple of other little points in the center as well. to be able to see points that would line up. Having cleaned up the map, I could find maybe 2 points that would line up and come somewhere close to my state. If I started adding a different kind of location, sacred mountains or special mountains, so I added Pilot Mountain in North Carolina because it generally fit the criteria. Supposedly, people used to use it to navigate because it has a very distinct shape to it. But in modern times, people have found it to have a certain energy that attracts them. If I added Pilot Mountain, that was a 3rd point, and I could, like, very roughly make a 2nd line that led somewhere towards my state. But these didn't bisect anywhere near my house. I even tried expanding, like zooming out on the map to see if I could make those points cross oceans and maybe hit some other place in the world, like the pyramids, like Stonehenge, like Machu Picchu. Like, I played with it every way I could, and I couldn't get it. I could not force it to a line to come into my area. But I've already skewed the map an incredible amount. Like, it really illustrated how easy it is to just, I hate saying this, but just kind of slap something on paper and call it a line. And this is one of the big arguments that a lot of people have, is like, if you were to map out all of the Starbucks in your city, like, chances are you can draw a ley line between 4 or 5 of them. You know what I mean? The other thing I realized, which it shouldn't have taken this to make me realize, but the other thing that hit me as I was desperately trying to draw straight lines in Google Maps was that it will not let you draw a straight line across an ocean because the Earth is round. Like, a lot of people draw maps of ley lines and they are in arrow straight lines, which is fine over land in a small area. But if you start trying to draw them between different continents or even across one continent, time to go. Like, you have to draw a curved line. You're not plotting things. It's not as simple and accurate as people think it is. It's going to be in a different place when you hit the other side of the planet. I know all of that sounded really skeptical. I know it sounded really negative. The thing is, I do believe in Earth energy. I do believe that there is something that people can feel and interact with that appears at different places around the globe. Whether you want to call them Earth energy centers or energy vortexes or just like whatever your Earth spirals, whatever your name for them is, people feel this, and you can take like a dowsing rod or a pendulum to them and they'll just go wild. Like, you can measure it in places like like Stonehenge, like the pyramids, Machu Picchu, Uluru, Mount Shasta. Like, there are places around the globe that are really well known where earth energy is strong. I just have a hard time getting behind the idea that this moves in perfectly straight lines. I believe all the people, because there are so many accounts. I haven't been to one of these places myself, but there are so many stories from people who have been there and felt it. Well, I can't just disbelieve that. I can't just brush that away. But the straight line thing, I can't say for sure. Of course, I haven't walked every inch of the planet, but you're really hard put to find a perfectly straight line in nature. It just doesn't happen every day. I found a man on YouTube really recently. His name is Tim Walter, and he is a geomancer, which means he goes into people's houses and dowses for energy, whatever. There are different kinds that run through structures, and he clears things out. He gets any like stagnant energy moving again, and then everything settles and everyone's happy. He does house healings is what he calls it. And he has a couple of videos that explain this a lot better than I can. But basically he says there's a difference between ley lines, the old straight tracks, the literal roadways cut into the countryside, and earth energy lines, which are radials that come out from earth energy vortexes. So he shows, like, him and his mentor, they will go out to like a standing stone in a field, and using the dowsing rods, they'll find out where the energy center is. They'll plot it out with stakes and strings, and they'll show you that there are lines coming outward from it, like in like a star pattern. But they don't necessarily connect to any other earth energy vortex. It's like a starburst. It's coming out, or I'll put a picture in here, or I'll link you to his channel so you can see it for yourself, because it's really cool. This makes much, much more sense to me, just knowing what very little I know about like waves and how they move in space. They like light, for example, light waves radiate outwards. So that clicked a little better in my head. After seeing that, I was, still terribly curious and a little inspired. So I said, okay, enough armchair exploration. I need to get out and actually see it for myself. So I took my dowsing rods out, and these are nothing special. They're just an old wire coat hanger that I cut up and bent. But I took them out in the yard and I said, okay, show me what you would do if you encountered earth energy. And they crossed. And I said, okay, what if we walk away from the earth energy and they separated? I was like, okay, this is significant on its own, because I've had these for a while now. I made them, like a year ago, because I was trying to communicate with spirits. And I've taken them out so many times and been like, please show me a yes, please show me, and they don't move, right? And I'll ask questions, they might jiggle a little bit, or one of them might kind of quiver, but they don't move. And when I ask them about earth energy, I guess they just like the topic. They very immediately and very definitely crossed and uncrossed. It was really impressive. It made me happy. Anyway, walking around my backyard, we found there's a little circle spot that's right off of my back patio. And there is a line that goes between two trees. The edges are a little mushy, but it's pretty well a line. It's only like 20 or 30 feet long, but it goes from the left side of one tree to the left side of the other tree. And then there is a area. It doesn't really have a definite shape. There's like a blotch that is right in the middle of a couple of peach trees. And that's interesting because that is exactly the area that I have been doing full moon rituals in the whole time I've lived in this house. And it's not a place that I like consciously picked. It's just where my feet kind of took me the first time I walked out there. But I found these 3 little spots out in the yard, and then we went in the house, and inside the house we found a very clear, very strong line. There's a line that runs down the hallway from like the kitchen end of the house to the bathroom end of the house. There's a line that basically runs down the hallway. The line through the hallway is interesting to me because from a paranormal or a witchy perspective, I guess, hallways are lined with doorways. And hallways, when you really think about it, are like one long run of doorways. So a lot of stuff pops up in this in-between space, like spiritually. This will get into a longer tangential story that maybe I'll tell next time. But like the hallway at my parents' house when we were kids, that hallway was haunted. And like at different points in my life, I've known spirits just like appear in hallways or out the corner of a door leading into a hall. Like hallways are special, right? So it was interesting that this line appeared there. I got super excited about this. So I went outside to see if the line extended past the house, and it does. On the bathroom end of the house, the line continues in the same exact place all the way to the property line. It runs north-south all the way to the property line. And then on the other side, on the kitchen side of the house, the line extends in the exact same place all the way to the property line. Now the catch is, on the kitchen side of the house, just off the driveway, that is where, like, we have 2 power lines on the property, or 2 power poles on the property, the line between them, and then it comes down, and they've buried a run, or they've buried a line that feeds our house. This comes in at a diagonal, but then it hooks and comes into the kitchen end of the house, right at the place where I was sensing energy. Last time we had, I forget what we were doing, something to do with the plumbing. We had the utility company come out and spray paint where all the lines and stuff were, and I've saved photos of that in case we ever need them again. And I went back and looked at it, I was like, damn, I just found electricity. Which is awesome if you think about it separately, that you can, like, utility companies still use dowsing rods to find buried electric lines and concrete vaults and things like pipes. Like, the fact that you can use electromagnetism to find hidden things is wild. That's like its own kind of magic, but that didn't, now we're right back to what is a ley line? Was I really picking up earth energy, or was I picking up the electromagnetic field of a buried cable? I walked over to, because I wanted to see, I walked over to the power lines, I walked underneath of them, And if I was walking along underneath the power lines, I got the same thing. The rods would also cross. What this doesn't explain is why, after that line runs into the house, on that same side, there is another line. The line goes the entire length of the line goes the entire length of the property, even though the electrical line does not. They just happen to be in the same place for a couple of feet. So now I was like really excited, and now I'm just really confused and frustrated because, like, did the electric company just happen to coincidentally run their line along an earth energy line that it goes through my house? Like, that's just a wild coincidence, you know? But the universe has a wild sense of humor. Or is there another power line or something that I'm not aware of that goes along that exact track? I feel like there really shouldn't be anything running through the center of the house along the hallway, because after the power line comes in the house, like you see the meter outside on the wall, it hooks a left and goes into the garage where the breaker box is, and then it's distributed like normal housing wiring, right? Like along the framework of the house. So there shouldn't be anything running in a straight line just from one point to another, as far as I know. I'm not an electrician, I don't know. I've seen pictures. And then why would it go out the other side of the house, out into the field? The neighbors all have their own connections off the power line on the street. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. So that's been my adventure with Ley Lines. I am, as a babe, lost in the wilderness. I guess to summarize, I feel like there's a difference between ley lines as old straight tracks and earth energy being something that naturally appears in certain spots and radiates out. There are some kind of energy spots in my backyard, and there may or may not be a line through my house. What these things are, I have no clue. How they work, I don't know. On the idea that spirits are attracted to or use ley lines to travel or to manifest, I did check out Ginny Matherall's channel. I like her a lot. I haven't watched all of her stuff yet, but I found the ley line videos. That's cool, because that's something I hadn't heard before. Spirits use ley lines to travel or pull energy from. After I watched those videos, I was also reading that there are old customs, folklores, like old tellings around the world that it's negative spirits or harmful spirits that move in straight lines. So I think it was Korea. Like in Korea, all the older roads are built with curves in them. So the negative spirits can't follow them, can't go from place to place. And so one of the theories about like the ley lines in Britain is that all of these sacred places were built along the straight lines because that like pure good energy would somehow block or stop any negative spirits that were traveling the roads with the ancient peoples. I feel like an earth energy vortex or an earth energy radial would be attractive to really any kind of spirit or any kind of mystical entity. And this is me, I think the word is extrapolating, because I don't know a whole lot about spirits at all, and I'm basing what I say about them on my framework as a human being. But if we're attracted to these places for their energetic qualities, then why wouldn't any other thing be? You know what I mean? Like, if we are mystically drawn, or we are inexplicably drawn to interact with earth energy, then it just kind of follows that like a once living human would be just as attracted as a living human, I guess. So I can get on board with that. Absolutely. Again, the mechanics of it, can't even pretend to know. Maybe that's not for me to know as a lowly human being. But that's definitely got my little brain wheels cranking too. I guess I can't... I guess I need to go out and like ask the spirits. You know what I mean? Like, I need professional advice. As I said that, the whole line of traffic lights in front of me started flickering just for a moment, and then they stopped. Like they were all going bad at once. That's cool. Like, I mean, it's raining. It might be an electrical glitch, but like, blink once for yes, blink two for no. Yes, I need to phone a friend. Oh, one thing I forgot to add that may or may not be useful to anyone interested in like ley line / earth energy theory, but also anyone who is into like paranormal investigations. If you live in North America, there's a website you can go to, and I'll link it down below, where you can look up a map of magnetic anomalies across the country. Like, scientists have done flyovers with equipment that can measure the electromagnetism of the Earth, and they've drawn out and color-coded where like the high and low points are. It's pretty trippy to look at. But using that, I could tell that while there is an odd kind of a blotch within the swamp that is behind our property, it doesn't necessarily extend to our area. So any of the weird things that I've been experiencing, and this odd line that runs through I don't necessarily think they are linked to the Earth's natural electromagnetism. Now, these charts aren't always super accurate, and that's a whole nother discussion. I've found many articles online about how more funding needs to be put into these survey projects, because a highly accurate map of this kind can be super useful to not just geologists, but like utility companies and things like that. It gets deep. It gets deep. Magnetic surveying science goes hard. What was I saying? Damn. Oh yeah. So even though it's not the most accurate, the map that I'm going to link below is at least a good starting point for you to rule in or out the effect of the Earth's magnetism on whatever it is that you're investigating. Okay, I am almost where I need to be, so I'm going to let you go for today. I would be super interested in hearing from, first off, your opinions on like ley lines versus earth energy lines. If you think there's a difference, or if you have more information than me and you know there's a linkage between them, like I'm flexible, you know. I want to believe. Or if you have been to, has anyone been to like a place where there are supposedly ley lines, or one of these old sacred sites that is like an earth energy vortex? Like, what did that feel like to you? Were you able to like measure it in some way? Is it a thing? Could you like feel the energy with your hand, or was it just a knowing you had? Like, how do you tell, basically, if you have found an earth energy line, or if you have found a ley line? How do you know? Right? Because what I found in my yard might be earth energy, or it might be like an old dried up well. You know, like the dowsing rods are capable of picking up different things. It might be a pipe. It might be just a void in the earth. It like a certain mineral. There are different things that can make the rods move. And so how do you differentiate? Anyway, I hope everybody has a really great day. Stay weird. Have fun. Bye.